Okay, now we are back. Hello, Twitch. Welcome to the Lakers Exceptionalism podcast streaming on Twitch TV /Lakers Exceptionalism Pod. And my name is Tom Z, joined as always by Tim, aka Cranjus McBasketball. And Tim, we are coming out of the weekend. How was your weekend, first of all, my guy?
Not too bad. It was good to have some time off. Finally home. I'd been traveling and seeing family, so it's good to be home. I've been gone for the past month. Nice to sleep in your own bed. How about you?
It was pretty good, man. Just chilling out, hanging, I'm working on an intro for this Twitch stream, but I've got, like I said before, lofty ambitions, and so it's taking longer than I wanted, but it's pretty damn cool, and I'm excited to show you guys. But yeah, today we're going to jump into kind of the defense, at least for a couple pods here, and try to zoom in and see what these new additions offer, some maybe their strengths, maybe their weaknesses, to see how we can fit them into a similar role that Vogel had last year in his defensive scheme that helped the Lakers win the championship. So yeah, Tim, why don't we jump into it today with Dennis Schroeder. So obviously any guards or smaller guys out there are going to have a little bit different responsibilities and ball screen actions. And let's try and pull up, if you're ready, some of the data for Schroeder, or see at least like get a feel for who he is as a defender. Or do you have anything to kind of set everybody up with?
No, that's what we can start there. We're thinking we'll go through guards, then the wings, then the bigs. Really today we're talking about what does the defense look like for this team moving forward? How do these new pieces fit in among what we do have? How can we potentially use guys better? For the new guys we're bringing in, how can we potentially use them better? Because especially for those players coming from other teams, they, in our minds, they may be who they were for the Clippers or the Thunder or whoever, but if we can tweak how we use them or what position they play or the environment around them, we might be able to unlock certain pieces of their game that we haven't quite seen in the past. And for our guards group, wings and bigs, I have at least one guy in each category that I think if you were to change their defensive role, and that's something we've talked about in the past, it could make a little bit more out of them. So let me pull up Schroeder. I am in his basketball index player profile. And we can see from this, he's very largely defending ones and twos. His defensive role was the point of attack. If we go down to, interesting. Okay, no defensive badges that mean much for him. His defensive matchup difficulty was a B+, so it's not like he was being hidden on defense or anything. From a versatility standpoint, D+ isn't too impressive. That will, if we go back down to who he's actually spending time defending, yeah, he's guarding point guards a lot. About 37% of his time, he'll guard twos, and then threes and fours, not so much, but around 10% of his time. And then he's not spending a whole lot of his time on defense guarding centers.
I would hope not.
His data in terms of guarding all stars or all NBA players or whatever is pretty average. So that's just giving you a sense of what his job has been in terms of who he spent time defending. That's what the numbers look like.
Okay. Well, let's get into some of this footage here I have. Again, hopefully this works a little bit. Let's turn that webcam off. And then
he caught that pass. He had a whole lot of meat left on that ball to get around that defender and dump the ball with his left hand. LaVine, and he will get. He caught that pass. He had a whole lot of meat left on that ball to get around that defender and dump the ball with his left hand. LaVine.
So let's jump at the beginning of this play.
He had a whole lot of meat left on that ball to get around that defender and dump the ball.
So pause it there.
His left hand.
So I'm gonna keep replaying this play. Anything
a lot of meat left on that ball to get around that defender and dump the ball with his left hand.
Yeah, so when we're talking about Schroeder's pick and roll defense, which will be a big part of what he brings to the team, because he's a strong on-ball guy, he's a strong pick and roll defender, he's okay off-ball, defending like cutters or off-screen shooters. He's not super active in terms of playing passing lanes. With this clip, one of the things that I notice about him, and as we go through these clips, it'll become more evident, is that he does a good job fighting around screens, and he'll use his footwork to try to get over them and fight to get back in front, and he'll often keep his arms out either up or keep them out laterally, trying to deter passes to the teammates, potentially dump off passes to a roll man. But he's also just a very light, smaller guy. So in some of these clips, we're going to see him be bumped around a little bit, lose his balance a bit, but he is pretty quick. He does a good job mirroring footwork and getting back in front. So in this clip, we really just see him use that high foot, get positioning, get leverage over the screener so that he can turn and recover.
Yeah, one thing he checks the ball handle. I'll try and right here. The Zach LaVine, he hand checks him and gets that ball pressure onto him as the ball screen comes. And LaVine does a good job at kind of turning away to use the screen, and Schroeder goes over the top well. There's some clips.
Tom, really quick.
Yeah.
Can you mute the audio in the clips you're showing?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Is that any better? Hopefully this works.
He caught that pass. He had a whole lot of meat left on that ball to get around that defender.
All right. We're still working out some tech difficulties here. I think this might work. Yeah. Okay, sorry about this, everybody. Properties. Maybe I can. So that's fun. I'm going to work on that right now, Tim. If you want to go back to his data, I'm going to pass it along to you for a sec, and I'll come back and actually.
Okay. So if they're able to see my screen, I believe I'm still sharing. We are taking a look here now at his perimeter defensive data on his player profile, and this is really more activity based than necessarily proficiency related. We can see some of these metrics. So we have a passing lane defensive number. From that D rating, we can tell that he's not all that active at getting deflections or getting those off-ball interception sorts of steals. But he is pretty active when it comes to picking guys' pockets. He has a B rating there for that pickpocket rating. Those are the on-ball steals that we're looking at. When he's on the court, he does have a good, strong impact on his team's ability to generate turnovers, and we see that in his real adjusted turnover rate, higher than 94% of players. So that's positive. If we look at the interior defense that he's played with in the lineups he's been in, it hasn't been good. So that can explain some of the more raw data that you might see for him. As an interior defender, he's really not that at all. Looking at his impact, so from a PIPM standpoint, A-, really good. RPM standpoint, B+, really good. Raptor, which is 538's metric, B+, really good. So he in that point of attack role was strong last season, and I would anticipate the Lakers look to keep him in that role. And actually, another cool thing, if we look at his rebounding, so he hasn't had that many chances. He's only had about 6 chances per 75 possession, so about per game. He's only had about 4 defensive rebounds per 75 defensive possessions. But looking at all of the different metrics around how often his teammates are boxing out, how far he is from the rebounds he's getting, all of those different things, and looking at this 71% success rate, his defensive rebounding success rate plus minus is actually in the 88th percentile. That's an A-. So we would say that given the context he's been in, when he has an opportunity to win a defensive rebound, he's done a pretty good job for himself. So that's a little context around him, but we also see from this box out rate that he's not boxing out all that much, and that F and that A- together end up with this C- real adjusted defensive rebounding rate, which shows us when he's on the court how well does his team rebound and collect those defensive boards. And it's been about average, a little bit below average. Did I buy you enough time?
A little bit, yeah. So I'm just re-exporting with that audio. We're still figuring out bugs here, y'all. Trying to figure out the best way to do this. Watching some of his data last night, watching some of his film, excuse me. He has a tendency to kind of step out a little bit too far onto the ball screener or onto the ball handler, and he ices a little bit too late sometimes. sometimes just general miscommunication with the other player in the pick and roll. So, that's just really hard to know whether that's his fault. I noticed some effort stuff where he could be a little upright. He does a good job in that first clip that we showed. Sorry, I'm trying to talk and buy myself some time to upload this other video and airdrop that to me. So I should have it here in about a minute, I would say.
Sure.
Airdropping
So,
this.
and I can add some more context too. So, and I also have, just like we used last time, if you go to menti.com, you can type in the code 113230, and I'll put that in the chat. You can fill in from your perspective. Let us know, what are you most worried about with this Lakers defense? Is it the shot blocking? Is it the wing stoppers? Is it our ball screen defense? What does that happen to be? I'm going to type that code in right now.
Nice.
So we'll take a look at that in a second. But another thing about his defense that I was trying to share, but I guess you guys couldn't hear me all that well with the audio and the clips, was when he's a ball screen defender, he, from a technique standpoint, does a pretty good job. He's just small, just physically. And a lot of times when I see him struggle with ball screens, it's because he's being knocked off balance and just not able to physically recover and use the speed and quickness that we know he has to be able to get around those screens. Now, what he does to avoid that is some of that jumping forward is smart. We see this with Wes Matthews as well. If you can move forward and get in front of that screen as it's coming, you can oftentimes avoid it and just not have to run around it if you're able to get around it as it's being set. That also oftentimes results in that screener trying to then extend the screen again, which can draw offensive fouls. But he does that to get around. And then once he is around, we'll see in a couple of these clips that he does a really good job mirroring the offensive player's footwork. So he jumps when they jump, his right foot's moving when their right foot's moving. And even though he's not a towering guy, he's smaller physically, he's in the right position and able to do about as good of a job as he can do given his physical limitations.
All right, Tim. So I've pulled up a clip here that we're playing in the Twitch stream. This is on Harden. I'm sorry, I thought it was in the same order, but I guess it's not. This is ball screen on Harden. Yeah, nice kind of getting into the ball handler defense there. So yeah, hopefully you're catching up right about now, Tim. But this is harassing. This is he gets low at least into a stance at one point, which sometimes is my issue with him. He doesn't seem to always get lower, kind of get ready. But yeah, he's active, he's handsy. That can lead to over fouling, but in this particular play, it's pretty good defense here on James Harden.
Yep, he mirrors well. We see the high hands. We see him not jump for the pump fake, but get ready to. We see him work around that screen pretty well. And I think just in general do a good job. You see part of why he has that B pickpocket rating. He's able to use those hands and go after guys in ball screens and make them just a little bit uncomfortable. And if you can throw off an offensive player's rhythm, that can do a lot to help your defense, even if, you're not going to like block their shot.
Mm-hmm. All right. So moving on to a couple other plays here. We have this here against the Bulls. Oh yeah, this is the play we just watched before, so we can watch this again. Like how he goes over the top and closes that angle. Yeah. Again, back pressure. That's gonna be his role, in my opinion, on this team. Is I don't think the Lakers' defensive scheme changes very much. So if you watch here as he goes over the screen, his job is to keep going hard here and not allow that pull up to be so easy for guys like Dame or Jamal Murray or all the great guards in the Western Conference who can pull up and really punish this screen coverage. But so he's good at that. He can be aggressive, and so this is where he follows and tracks well. Just to kind of keep with him, still stays on the inside part of his shoulder and gets back in front of, looks like Bryn Forbes there maybe, or Derek White. I'm not sure, but yeah, this is good defense as well. Just kind of staying in front of his guy, even though he makes the shot. I think that's pretty good defense.
Yep. Yeah, he with all these clips, watch the mirroring of the footwork, watch him move forward. He hops forward to get a better angle to go around the screen. Like you said, that back pressure will be really important when the Lakers are playing drop coverage. We don't expect him to get all the way back in front all the time, but if he can just be enough of a nuisance in that rear view mirror and then have his hands in a position to try to deflect passes if they are going to that dump off, you can do a pretty good job just as a defensive unit in guarding ball screens. And another thing that OKC did quite often was switching ball screens or other actions. And so I think just in terms of taking a guy and sticking him in the Lakers scheme that was very much scrambling and recovering, and you're going to have to defend all kinds of different guys. He's not the most versatile defender, but in terms of identifying and diagnosing the situation and getting to wherever that open guy is and just doing that scramble drill, I think he'll fit pretty well, just because I think that translates well from what OKC did last season to what the Lakers like to do.
Awesome. Yeah, we're running this play against Boston here, and the thing I like is that hop forward to close the gap, like you described with like Wesley Matthews. He hops, but he's square. And that's good. You get into trouble, like I said last pod, where you hop and you give up an angle, or your hop is too long and it gives the defender a chance to change direction and leave you in the dust. But this hop here closes the distance and makes Kemba use that screen a little bit higher, a little bit wider of an angle too, so he can't just step into that shot as easy. So yeah, that's good technique there.
Where we will see him get in trouble is because he's smaller and because he has a higher center of gravity. And this is something you've mentioned. He'll be a little bit higher up in his stance at times. If he doesn't get that hop in and get around the screen and he gets bumped, you see it in one of these clips where he just kind of is like on one leg, just trying to regain that balance before he's able to move it all. So that is where I would hope to try to see him improve a little bit, do that pre-work before the screen gets there. Because if he doesn't, then you run into that issue, or get him lower in his stance. So you don't have to beat the guy around the screen, but you want to be able to trail effectively and at least try to become a nuisance for them in some respect. So overall, I think he's still good. I think there's some room for improvement in those specific areas. And I think we've seen some of the specific technique that he uses to be the type of defender we've seen him be pretty consistently with ball screens.
All right, bud. So we got one coming up here. Some more screen coverages against the Clippers. I know you're a little bit behind in the stream there, but I'm going to throw this to you and give you a chance to react, because I'm going to try and queue up a few more of these plays. So, yeah, you should be seeing it about now. This is the ball screen coverages against the Clippers.
All right, yeah, I'm watching it right now. Yeah, that was the one where he's a little bit high in his stance. He's kind of like wheeling around rather than chasing. It almost looks like he's trying to like say to the ref, "Hey, I'm not doing anything wrong." Yeah, I don't. Yeah, not the best clip. That was one of the he's not doing a great job in this possession clips that I pulled.
But again, this is kind of stance stuff to me, and where he gets into like lackadaisical kind of defensive lapses. Where that's just. And, some guys do have a high center of gravity, and that's just kind of how their body works. But this is, he's on his heels when the screen is coming at him, kind of. So he's already lost. He's hanging out. Yeah. He's trying to move forward, but he's not leaning forward. He's still kind of leaning back. There's a lot of little issues here with this. He could have shot the gap there to try and avoid that screen. Some just like effort stuff, it seems like, that, or scheme that can improve some of this, or maybe he just messed up. But yeah, that's like a matador with the red cloth there. He just like, whoop.
Yep. Yeah. So I think we've covered Schroeder's pick and roll game. I think if we think about the guard rotation and what the defensive roles will be, you want to have point of attack defenders. If you don't have point of attack defenders, you're in trouble. We have Caruso and we have Schroeder as those point of attack defenders. You also want to have guys who can be more of the defense for those off-ball guards, chasing dudes around screens, and you'll still do some point of attack, but again, it's all on a spectrum, but their primary job is going to be more as a chaser. And for that, KCP is really good at that. And Caruso is pretty darn good at that. Schroeder's okay. I would prefer to have him at the point of attack. Where you get in trouble is if he's defending a larger point guard, and this is where we saw Harden give him a lot of trouble, or if he's defending a guy like Luka gave him trouble in the past. You want to have him on like point guard, smaller dudes at that point of attack, because that is probably the most effective way to use him. I think Caruso gives you a lot of flexibility because he's just so versatile of a guard defender. It's such an incredible defensive piece because he can be point of attack, he can be a chaser, and he's good at that. And he's also pretty good as a helper, playing more off ball, rotating really smartly, taking charges as a rotating defender, causing just a tiny little bit of trouble at the rim for guys at times, and playing passing lane. So you can use it in a bunch of different ways, and that's why he's so important to this defense. Schroeder, point of attack, that's the way you want to use him. KCP, he had been a wing stopper this past season, which is crazy to me because we know that's not what he's best at. And he had a defensive PIPM, so and also defensive RPM. So two different impact metrics for his defense. He had F grades this past season. And with Raptor, he had a C-. So by any of those measures, he was a negative impact defender this past season. And the Lakers defense was still fine regardless, but you want to put him in a better position to succeed. And if you think about what he was asked to do and what he could potentially be asked to do related to what he's good at and what he's poor at, he would be much better off as a chaser. So I think bringing Wes Matthews in, and that's where I'm going next, is Wes Matthews allows you to bring in a guy who's he was used as a chaser last season. He's better as a wing stopper. KCP was the opposite. If you can slot those two guys into better roles for them, you should be able to make more out of both of them. And we're not going to cover film on Caruso or KCP or the other Lakers defenders that have been on the team already, but Matthews, I think, is the next guy we'll get into. He's someone that we've talked about the on-ball defense, but I want to look at some of that off-ball defense and some of that ball screen defense, because he does a couple things from a technical standpoint that are worth pointing out, either as teaching points or things we'd love for him to either improve upon or just to kind of point out why he's good or bad in specific areas.
Okay, so do you want to move on to off-ball stuff on Schroeder? Or sorry, is it Schroeder or Matthews?
Matthews,
yeah. I'm working on that video as we speak. So, Tim, why don't you pull up some of the data for what Wes Matthews, and I will hopefully be shortly behind.
Okay, cool. So I am pulling up his player profile right now. He has no guards or no badges. Defensive role was as a chaser, as we said. He's actually fairly versatile. B versatility, his matchup difficulty, as we've mentioned before on a previous pods, previous streams, A 99th percentile matchup difficulty. So this guy takes on tough matchups. He has been a wing stopper in the past, so putting him into that role makes plenty of sense. He's done it before. He's better at that than what he was asked to do last season as a chaser. If we look at his defensive rebounding, here's another guy that his raw numbers aren't going to look great, but in terms of him actually winning his own battles, C+ for that success rate. And then adjusting for context, he was a B 69th percentile defensive rebounder. So pretty good. And the team in Milwaukee was much better when he was on the court defensively in terms of collecting defensive rebounds. We've said before, someone mentioned in the comments, he's quick and thick, and I think we see that a bit. His box out rate here is a C, and that might not look very good, but let me pull up leaderboard. Let's pull this one up, and we're going to look at the box out rate, because the Lakers added 3 players who box out at really high rates. First, we'll look at guards, which is what Matthews is categorized as. And we're going to get rid of some of these other filters that we have in here. Make sure all teams are selected. Okay. So adjusted box out rate for guards who've played at least 500 minutes. And there are, let's see how many of those there are. 138 of those. He ranked 5th in terms of how often, or I'm sorry, he ranked 6th in terms of how often he's boxing out. So contextualize a bit further, his first tendency oftentimes is to box out. So I think that's really positive. If we look at bigs now, you're going to see a couple names here that pop up. Montrezl Harrell is 5th. And then if we go find Marc Gasol, he's not too far behind. He is also up here. He's 33rd at an A- 90th percentile rating. out of the 82 players. So we added 3 dudes who box out pretty often, and I think we'll see that be important this upcoming season and give other players opportunities to run in, just swoop in, grab those rebounds, and go. With Matthews, this is him again, right? Yeah, this is still Matthews. From a perimeter defensive standpoint, his passing lane defense, his pickpocket rating, they're not all that good. So if you look at just box score numbers to evaluate his defense, you're not going to get a whole lot from him, or you're not going to see him as being a big positive. But we saw those other things be useful. He's versatile. He takes on tough matchups. This shot profile disruption metric looks at when he's on the court, how does the other team's shot profile change? Are they getting easier shots or more difficult shots? They're getting much more difficult shots when he was on the court relative to that Milwaukee Bucks defense in general. So he was a pretty important. Yep.
Did he take on tougher matchups than Chris Middleton?
Probably. Let's take a look. I would assume so
because he's not in the chat.
Yeah, he was like 4th or 5th in the league. Yeah, Middleton is a B, although was pretty versatile, A-.
So that's them using Matthews as the primary defender, and that proves to your metric as well that you want Chris Middleton to be spending most of his energy on the offensive end because that's where he's best. But I watching the tape a little bit last night of Danny Green as well. There's an athleticism, a speed that Wesley Matthews has that's probably a little bit closer to KCP than Danny Green at this point. But again, the size, multiple pressures from the back, blocks by Danny Green, help blocks, so there's a give and take here with what Matthews brings to the table, but he's definitely stronger than Schroeder in some of this stuff. So I'm trying to play this, hopefully.
Middle now, so hoist it up.
Boom. I can mute the media source like that, go like that. Boom. Okay. I know I'm talking out loud. This is probably great radio, but I'm getting there slowly but surely, y'all. I got this play.
I'll mention one more thing with Matthews. If we think about, so he was a chaser. That's not the best role for him. We'll get into why. Despite that, 97th percentile defensive PIPM, 96th percentile defensive RPM, 89th percentile defensive Raptor. He was a highly impactful, good defensive player, despite not being used optimally. And if I think I pulled this up previously, if we look at the types of players he's defending, he was guarding those higher usage guards really often, those mega creators, and the higher usage wings really often as well. So he was pretty borderline between a chaser and a wing stopper, but if you move him more into a wing stopper role, I think that could be really important for what he's able to bring. He is only 6'4", but he's been very good at this. We talked about that one-on-one on-ball defense and how good it is and why it's good from a technical standpoint. I'm excited to get through some of the clips we're going to look at now. I will note that I think the fact that the Lakers haven't added another guard to the rotation, I think Glenn Robinson III would have been that guy to play that chaser role, will mean that we're going to see Matthews used more as a chaser than is ideal for him. We're going to see a little bit of a repeat of what Milwaukee did with him last season, because if he's your shooting guard in the lineup, if you have like Caruso and then him defensively, because LeBron might play point guard on offense, but defensively, he's not going to be guarding guards as often. If Caruso is your point of attack or Schroeder's your point of attack, and then Matthews is the guy out there, my watch is talking to me. He might end up being your chaser when ideally he's more of a wing stopper, but you'd rather have him be your chaser than like LeBron. So he, from a slotting standpoint, from a defensive role perspective, may not be set up the best to succeed. You want him out there as a wing stopper with like KCP as a chaser, Schroeder as your point of attack guy, and then Matthews as the wing stopper, I think is how you slot how he fits in. And the Lakers and the lineups they run, I think, will be really interesting in the playoffs because of the fact that he's like a guard offensively, but more of a wing defensively, I think, for Matthews.
Yeah, and it's just, it's the position that the Lakers probably have the least depth in right now, and it might be the most important place to have reasonable depth there because, one Wes Matthews injury, and you are just very, very sad about your wing defense. So let's pull up a couple of these clips here. I think I got it all figured out. You guys won't be hearing it.
The lowest field goal percentage in the league at the rim in the restricted area.
Such a great addition to this team.
Damian Lee
Okay, that should be good.
really calling style with his.
So which one is this? Okay. Yeah, we're having
So
a
we're
good
looking
time.
at
Come
off
hang out
ball or ball screen first.
We should be looking at off ball now.
Okay.
Boom.
So with these, what I want to point out about his defense, just a couple of things. So from an efficiency standpoint, he was below average defending these situations. From a suppression standpoint, so in terms of, the defense runs a pin down, does the pin down result in a shot, or are you able to like stop it? They don't even get a shot off. He was very poor in those situations. And a big piece of that is his trail technique is not, and I think just physically isn't where you want it to be. He doesn't do a good job trailing. And a lot of times you'll see this with him taking really big, long strides. And then his momentum is moving him in a direction that doesn't let him change directions really well. So in ball screens, when he's taking choppier steps, it's easier, but off ball sprinting full speed and then trying to change direction, he isn't very good at that. And I think some of it's technique, some of it's physical, but with a lot of these, you'll see that he may struggle just because of those longer strides to get to where he needs to get. Now, that said, he does a good job getting back pressure. He does a good job defending, I think, with his hands once he's trailing. But before he goes around the screen, he does too much trying to defend with his hands rather than his feet at times. So if you can just keep rolling through these, you'll see, defend with your feet instead of your hands, shorten those steps up, and he'll be more effective in these situations.
Yeah, just pointing out here for our listeners on this first clip, it's semi-transition and he's backpedaling, covering his guy, and he just doesn't notice that his guys keep going and his back pedal is out of position and he has to flip his hips all the way around to chase. And then, the guy misses the shot, but he gives up a good 3-4 feet on a wide open, like 15-foot pull up. So, just the hips not in position, right? It gets caught flat footed here. Once you're here in this moment, I paused it. That guy's got to step on you and the screen's coming. You're going to be multiple steps behind that play unless you just have crazy athleticism to close the distance, but that's not Wes Matthews anymore. So let's try to go back to another one here. Boom. Let me resize this.
Yeah. And some of it's awareness too. Like you pointed out, he's losing early and he doesn't have the physical abilities and technique to make up for losing that battle early when he's trailing. And a lot of times because of that, he's been more limited to trying to go around screens rather than trailing and just kind of hoping that shooter misses the shot. Or like it just hoping they don't read that and then fade off of the screen. So there are ways to counter the way he tries to work around his limitations as a trail man.
For sure.
But he does get good back pressure. That's one thing he is good at. When he is able to recover, and we see this in ball screens too, he does a good job and he's large and he'll get in your rear view mirror and make life a little bit difficult for you if he can.
All right, so now I just pulled up this clip here against the Warriors, another one. So Wes Matthews, just to set this up, it's after a missed free throw attempt, and he's in the backcourt. He's going to kind of protect the rim, but he just lags too far off the shooter here. And they just come up and set a little screen for, it looks like Kai Bowman. And he tries to shoot the gap here, but he doesn't have the acceleration. And he gives up a wide open. He might have even fouled the guy as well. So lots to keep watching for him. I'm going to pull up a couple different clips. Hope see if we can't keep rolling through some Wes Matthews tape here.
Yeah, he can be a plotter at times defensively, where he's like moving, but he's not really moving fast. But yeah, he's much better in those on-ball screens than the off-ball screens. It's a lot of it, I think, is technique.
So here he gets pinned pretty good on a flare screen from Siakam. And part of this is that Giannis is kind of in his way to like lock and trail behind. Well, kind of gets screened by his own guy. But what are you seeing on this one here, Tim?
Yeah, I see Giannis not really recognizing at all what's going on. That hurts him. He's kind of in the way from him being able to trail. He goes over. There's a little bit of a grab there by Siakam as well, which makes life difficult.
He's out of it before
with that screen.
Though.
Yeah, he's got to be just closer to his man if he knows. And this is a Toronto team that I didn't pull all the clips for them, but they had been targeting Matthews defensively a lot of that game in terms of making him chase shooters off of screens. And so he should have been more aware of that. And you can't be a beat slow and out of position to start and not have the technique and quickness to get around those screens. So he needs to clean up a lot of this, and it's hurt him in the past. If the Lakers can improve upon that, and I think it will be important for them to improve upon that, because this is likely what he'll end up doing a lot of his time defensively, just because either teams won't have a wing for him to be a wing stopper against as like the 2 guard in a lineup or 3 guard in a lineup, but he just might be that shooting guard a lot of times. And the style of defense he'll be asked to play won't best fit what he's best at.
Look, man, like watching this film of these players, I watched some more of the film last night of Dwight and JaVale's minutes defensively in the playoffs. And like, say what you will about those guys and their athletic standpoint, they're better than Marc Gasol and Montrezl Harrell still on defense. So defense is still a bit of a concern to me, and whether or not the Lakers got better long-term offensively enough to make up for that, we'll see. I think they did, but it's stuff like this where you're watching like, oh man, Danny Green is underappreciated in these ways. And, you know, with Wes Matthews kind of a step down from that, and Harrell and Gasol a little bit step down from that, both like physicality and like athleticism, length, defense at the rim. I'm more concerned than I was at the beginning, Tim. I think we've flipped kind of our roller coaster paths here, because I'm slightly more concerned about the defense now after going through some of this film.
Yeah, I would agree. I think losing Avery Bradley and not replacing that position, I think, is important. Because just losing, I think, a guard from that rotation or making Matthews have to play out of his ideal role hurts you a bit. Like you said, going from 2 really good rim protectors off ball, and Dwight is a really good on ball rim protector, to Harrell and Gasol, it's different. I think it can still work. I think Gasol is still, you should view him like Howard in that he's going to drop in ball screens and he's going to be a good on ball post defender, and off ball he's going to be okay. So in that sense, if he kind of brings that, but Harrell instead of McGee, he's definitely a step down in a lot of the ways that McGee was good, but I think there's a lot of potential to make more out of Harrell than what the Clippers made out of him. And we'll get to him in a little bit here, and I'll talk more about that. But just like you said, it's been a roller coaster. I see the ups, I see the downs, I see what we're for sure getting, but I also see what we're giving up. But I also see what there's potential to make more out of, just because for several of these guys, I think the Lakers will put them in better positions to succeed than the incumbent teams from last season.
Definitely. And it's always kind of a mystery, at least, with what guys are going to look like around star players like LeBron James and Wesley Matthews. I'm trying to export the rest of those Wesley Matthews clips that Freudian slip with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Like these guys can make players better in ways we don't know quite yet, and makes their lives easier in ways that have yet to be seen. So I'm optimistic, but I just also a little worried about the strain it puts on Anthony Davis as a defender. And I guess, watching Gasol, his minutes in the playoffs, and we'll get to that once we're able to look at the film more and kind of zoom in on what concerns us. But he's considerably slower footed than JaVale, and Boston in particular, they moved their ball screens with Tice up like super high on the court, like the way Portland does. And Kemba, was just able to attack Marc Gasol's like low, deep drop, because Marc's not going to sprint out there. If he moves toward Kemba and Kemba comes toward him, like it's even harder for him to adjust and defend the rim. but then like that middle of the floor is wide open, that step up three is wide open, and even if you have an amazing guy going over screens, like that shot's still going to be there. And there's a lot of guys in our conference who will just murder us. Even like a Steph Curry, whose team might not match up as well. That particular weakness is starting to concern me a little bit.
Yeah, and that's a weakness that you have a guy in Gasol that's less equipped to play more aggressive screen coverages than JaVale or Dwight were. And that's where you probably just end up benching him in a playoff series if you and put Harrell and Keith and AD and LeBron more in those positions to play those other either switching or hard hedging or running those catch hedges or shocking the ball or whatever it happens to be. I think we have the right pieces to do it. We're just not. I think in general the Lakers have lost depth. We've lost guard depth. Like we literally just lost a dude for the play. Like as the playoffs were happening and it didn't really matter. We can't lose one of the guys we have left with this roster between Matthews, KCP, Caruso, and Schroeder and expect it to be okay. In terms of shot protection, shot blocking, rim protection depth, which was another thing that we see you, the listeners right now, have identified as something you're concerned about. I think that's very true. If AD in general going down isn't good, but if Gasol goes down, then you have no like Markieff and Harrell, they're not at all those post defenders or shot blockers. We don't have extra guys. We were able to sit JaVale for like the whole playoffs and still have plenty of rim protection. So I think you've identified the right areas. Tom, you ready to go through some more film on Matthews?
Yeah. I'm trying to queue up the right spot here because I got it all inputted. Looks like this next one's against Miami. I think this is all pick and roll stuff.
Mm-hmm. So something with Matthews to be aware of is he's been really good in ball screens. He's been good he's been elite on ball, not great off ball, pretty good, 70th, 75th percentile level ball screen defender. And a big difference between the off ball stuff and the on ball stuff is we'll see him not be taking those really super long strides and moving his momentum in the wrong directions. He closes space well, just like we saw with the on ball stuff. He trails and recovers well, just like we saw with the on-ball stuff and the off-ball stuff. But he's, in better position, and he's taking those shorter, choppier steps to get around the screens and do a much better job there.
Yeah, like, for example, I'm trying to pause at the right moment, but so they're going to kind of set a double, drag for Jimmy here, and West does a good job of icing it or weaking it at the right time. I'm sorry, I'm laughing because Jason just said, I swear Tim loves old dudes in the chat, and that made me laugh as I was talking. Tim loves just a very specific undervalued market player. And it's not like a player type, it's just whoever's undervalued, like your Jeff Greens and your wasn't Trey Burke on your list last year, and he's turned around and made himself a reliable role player. But,
he looked like an all-star against the Clippers backcourt defense. Pat Beverly's trying to stop Trey Burke. It just can't happen.
You're embarrassing both of us. Okay,
but good question. We'll get to next time we're waiting and pulling film. I'll go pull up Taj Gibson's player profile, and we can look at him because somebody in the chat was asking about him as a potential signing. Getting back to Matthews' ball screen stuff, with a few of these clips, you'll see him either hop forward to give himself a better angle to get around screens, or you'll also see him in a clip or two hop backward and be the one making the contact with the screen so that he's not knocked off balance. He uses that low center of gravity, and then he's able to turn much more easily to get around those screens than if the screener were the one making contact with him. So either moving forward or moving back, you see how antsy his feet are, but in a good way, not just without purpose. That in him being the aggressor in the ball screen situations does a good job for him to get around those. And then he's a really good player in terms of getting that back pressure as well.
The thing with antsy feet, and this is something I noticed with Harrell when we get to him eventually, is he's over antsy and energetic and just crazy happy feet, and it's a bad thing for him because it's unnecessary. It doesn't give him advantage. All of this motion here from from Wesley Matthews. Sorry, coming off of like trying to get Jimmy Butler to reject this screen. It all helps him by changing angles. So, he changes angles each time to give him a better chance to stay in front of him and close the angle that Butler has here. So all of that movement it might not seem necessary because Butler didn't make him pay for it, but that's why, is because he made him work for it a lot more. And yeah.
And he's not playing Dance Dance Revolution. He's not just dancing around.
No.
As he he is moving to mirror what Jimmy is doing with Jimmy's footwork and with the ball. He is reacting to what he's seeing and preparing himself to move in the direction it looks like Jimmy's going to have him move. And then as Jimmy, puts the ball in a different direction or rips through or jab steps, he's adjusting along with that.
All right, so we're moving on to a clip here against Orlando, and still ball screen coverages. Looks like he's guarding Fournier on this one. Yeah, just going to fight over the screen, force a mid-ranger. It's pretty good. Yeah. See, that's what I like, is a guy like Fournier is a guy who's going to be like a movement shooter, right? He'll catch ball off of a down screen or a pin down or a flare or something like that. And Matthews knows that, and he's tracking him the whole time. So when he has his back to the player, he's assuming the ball's getting in there, and he's pressuring those lanes with putting his hands up, trying to just funk up those passing lanes, because he knows. Yeah, mirror him, watch him. You don't always. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and this is one where I think one of the weaker parts of his ball screen game is if you run someone off of an off-ball screen first, and then they catch, and then they're immediately using a ball screen, whether it's off a handoff or something like that. If you set him up by playing into that weaker technique and weaker ability with those pin downs or flare screens, and then attack him in a ball screen, he's a little bit less able to handle the subsequent action. And I think that's what we see here a little bit. He really gets caught up in that screen. He recovers pretty well, but it's a situation where he doesn't really have the opportunity to jump forward and try to get around that, just because he's still recovering to the action that just happened.
Yeah, he is about like a half step behind, at least on that play. Once he gets screened, the shot's there. He works to stay in the play, but yeah, I could see what you mean. You can see like guys like Damian Lillard and Jamal Murray, like that's gonna be a concern for guys like that, unless you have like your KCP Alex Caruso defending those guys instead. But that's kind of where you almost want Matthews playing undersized against a bigger guy, and he can kind of still manage a little bit, but the more guardy they are, the more he gets into trouble.
Yeah. He used his quickness in matchups that his quickness is an advantage, where it is against those bigger guys, quick and thick. Use his girth and use that footwork to let him match up with those bigger dudes and be able to withstand any contact they give him, and use that good mirroring footwork, getting around screens and handling those one-on-one ISO situations. I like that better. I'm okay with him being an inch or two shorter than what you would like, because he does such a good job positionally through all of the things we talked about. At whenever the shot does go up, he's in position, he's contesting, and you're just going to need the offensive player to make a tough shot. I'm more comfortable with that.
All right, Tim, I'm going to throw it back to you because we got a few questions about a couple guys in the chat. So let me know when you are ready for, why don't we start with Taj Gibson?
Sure. Okay. Let's pull up Gibson. And he is not someone I have really looked much at. So I'm looking at his player profile right now. He offensively is a big roll and cut big. Defensively, he's been a mobile big, which tells us that he's been someone who in ball screen situations has been used fairly versatilely. He might be a guy who can play more of those aggressive screen coverages. He's less of an anchor big. Isn't versatile. Took on decently difficult matchups. Let's scroll down to his defensive rebounding. It was not very good. His success rate was quite poor this past season, 62%. And his percentile is just slightly worse when you consider the context he's had. He does box out quite a bit. That, along with the poor individual rebounding, has him at just a slightly negative 46th percentile impact on the team's ability to grab defensive rebounds. Now, he is pretty good in offensive rebounds. Why don't we can cover his whole game, not just his defense. So let's see. He's not a shooter. We see from these stars, he hasn't been taking many threes. Not an ISO guy. In terms of getting to and finishing at the rim, he finishes pretty well. B+ there in terms of his field goal percentage at the rim. A-. That finishing at rim rating. Not much of a playmaker, it looks like. As a roll guy, he's been a good roller, 94th percentile impact, and he'll switch up rolling and slipping and popping a good bit. Has plenty of screen assists. He's a post player. If we think about what kind of post player he is, he's often trying to finish at the rim. He's not taking jumpers, taking some hook shots. He's often facing up or driving middle, doesn't go baseline all that much. Posts up at the left block more often. He's not passing much out of those. Let's get into the defense. So as an interior defender, looks pretty good. Perimeter defender, this is more of the activity rather than impact stuff. His overall impact this past season does not appear to have been good on either end of the court. A little bit better defensively than offensively, but not much was made out of him in New York this past season. So I don't know. That could be a guy you look at. He's more, I can see him as being a player that offensively is just kind of in that dunker spot or setting screens for dudes, and defensively you use him like a Markieff Morris, or potentially how I was thinking with the Dwayne Dedmon, where he's able to play different kinds of more aggressive screen coverages. I think the trouble with him is he just can't space the floor. So that makes it tough for him to play with Harrell. It's tough for him to play unless he's with one of those floor spacing bigs, which we have a few of. So I don't know. I'm not thrilled. If he came to the Lakers, I can see how it could fit, but he wouldn't be, I don't know. He's not someone I'm crossing my fingers to go grab.
Yeah, I'm curious kind of what he looks like in his pick and roll defense, because that's what I'm concerned the most about, is somebody who's able to have the quickness and foot speed to challenge guys on the pull up, which, watching the film, putting together what Gasol's weak at, what Harrell's weak at, that's concerning to me. So I'm almost there. Hold on. I'm pulling this up. I have synergy on Taj Gibson's pick and roll defense, and I think I have it right here. Boom. Okay. So let's try this out really quick, Tim. I don't know if you can watch, but we'll just kind of let some of these roll, and I'll give you my reactions as I watch. This against the Hawks. Looks like Hunter against Hunter and Young. Young and Fernando. I mean, he's got some foot speed, more than Marc Gasol. He's always been kind of undersized, so he's not like gonna. Oh gosh, is that really what you guys see? I'm so sorry. I'm having some tech difficulties. I apologize. Are you still with
Why don't
me,
we? So, we can dig more into him another time. Why don't we get through the rest of this Lakers roster? He can be a guy we look at another time with film we grab. But the last thing I would say with him is he's been primarily a drop coverage big that mixes in some switching, but not a whole lot, maybe like 10-15% of his possessions. He's not someone that's been used to double team a whole lot, but he's been a hard hedge big quite often. Relative to other bigs. So he would fit that more mobile big kind of category. If you're looking for a guy in the playoffs who can play different screen coverages, be more versatile than like a Marc Gasol, who's just like a drop coverage kind of big. Again, just offensively, it makes it tough because he just can't shoot and he can't do much other than finish dump offs. And he's already an undersized guy. He would be a 6'9" center essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a hard stop in about half an hour. So why don't we talk more about, so we talked about Matthews. I guess the other wings on the roster would be LeBron, who's been more of that helper defender. He's more of a rotator. He's really good at it. He's going to defend the rim as a secondary defender at the rim. He'll even take charges. He'll pick passes off. His defensive impact last season in that helper role was an A or an A and a B, depending on which impact metric you look at. So I'm happy keeping him in that position. And then Kyle Kuzma is the other guy who he's, I think, a wing stopper sometimes, more of a perimeter big at other times, defending, kind of shooting threes or shooting fours off ball. He would be my break in case of emergency wing stopper that the team could use, but I would prefer to have Matthews out there, or AD or LeBron potentially before him. But I guess to slot AD and LeBron properly, you could just have Kuz. You could throw Kuz out there as one of those wing stoppers. And often teams throw more than one guy at a scoring wing. So that could be an interesting fit for him defensively. I think it's important to not trade him until you know that Wes Matthews is looking pretty good in that wing stopper role. And then getting to the big, so Harrell and Gasol are the two guys we're going to look at film for. Harrell, this past season, has been used as an anchor big. That is not the best role for him. Why don't I pull him up on here? He's been used as a 5. He is not a 5 defensively. He's 6'7", 6'6", depending on what you look at. Anchor big, offensively, post scorer. If we look at his rebounding, 0th percentile in terms of that success rate plus minus. His raw success rate is also an F. He boxes out often, but he's not winning individual defensive matchups. And overall, he's been a negative. He's had a negative impact on the team's ability to grab rebounds defensively. As an interior defender, he's actually been pretty good. And these numbers look even better if you compare him to just power forwards rather than anchor bigs or centers. So I think if you were to slot him as a power forward, this interior defense as more of a help guy will come out to play. I think in that more help, I would have him as a perimeter big. So not an anchor big where his primary job is defending the rim and drop coverage, not as a mobile big where he's primarily he's playing the 5 in ball screens, but can be more switchy or hard hedging or whatever. I'd have him as a perimeter big where he's more away from the action. He's defending some of those stretch 4s or stretch 5s, and let him use his quickness, which he very much has, and let him be the guy he can be in terms of sprinting in there to go take a charge or to block a shot. And the fact that he's so forceful, I think, is really helpful. This, I think, just will help him stay away from what he's weaker at, which is the post on-ball defense, and let him play into some of his individual strengths. I think the Clippers made about the least of him as you could defensively, given his role, given his teammates. The Lakers will do a much better job making more out of his defense. And if you look at his post defense against Jokic, which has gotten some attention, I looked at the film. Denver had 21 points in 15 possessions with him as Jokic's defender in the post with Jokic getting the ball, which is really bad, 1.4 points per possession. And that was basically 15 possessions in like 5 games because they really quickly got away from using him in that role. And they were using like Paul George as Nikola Jokic's on-ball defender over him later in that series. So like he is not good at that. The data is really weak. Guys are scoring efficiently and they're not needing to pass out. So he's really weak in that role. So playing him more as a power forward, trying to avoid that, using his quickness is a much better way to use him. And you can use him in different ball screen situations. I am really surprised that the Clippers used him the way they did. If you look at Harrell from 15-16, 16-17, and 17-18, he switched a higher percentage of on-ball screens than AD has ever switched in his whole career within the tracking era. So Harrell has been used as a switch defender. He's been used as like a hard hedge guy, a blitz guy pretty often. But this past season with the Clippers, they used him like he was Marc Gasol, and that's just not the way to get the most out of Montrezl Harrell.
Yeah, I watched some of that Jokic film as well, and like my takeaway is, like I said before, Harrell gets happy feet. He is over enthusiastic, and against a guy like Jokic, he's just waiting for that moment when your feet come off the ground a little, and he's already got the size advantage, and he gets into you. He'll face up against Harrell and then literally just wait for Harrell to move his feet a little bit and open up a lane. And then once you have a little bit of room to get the shoulder ahead of him, he just bullies Harrell and uses that size advantage. There's stuff where Harrell's jumping passing lanes, like literally jumping to contest like a Mason Plumlee high post, passing angle, and Plumlee just drops it off, like goes around him because he jumped for no reason. Just lots of mental errors, I think, with Harrell that I saw in the film.
Yeah.
And
he has. Go ahead, Tom. Go ahead.
No, just like mental errors and poor technique that's coachable, but there's sometimes where he would close out and it would look lazy, and I really wonder, Tim, like seeing how he played on the floor, if he wanted to be there.
Mm-hmm. I haven't gotten that same characterization from watching some of the film. I don't know. Maybe I'm either poor at doing that, or I just try to keep it at like he's good at this, he's not good at that.
For sure.
More so than like trying to assume some of the more mental stuff. I will say that his technique is poor with closeouts, which is the case for a lot of bigs. Jumping at guys, taking longer strides. You want to close out with hands up with choppy steps and be ready to move if you need to move. His post defense, he's undersized, but I think what he can do to improve that would be to use his quickness to his advantage and really do a lot of his work pre-catch by doing what we saw the Lakers do against Jokic in the playoffs, where they had someone 3/4 Jokic, which means you don't fully front him. And that's another thing you could do with Harrell, but you don't fully front him. You have him on the high side where 3/4 of Jokic's body are kind of covered by you, and the offense has to throw the ball to a very specific place. And then if they're able to execute that, then you use his quickness to get back behind on the catch. So that helps deter post opportunities in a less risky way than just fully fronting. Because if you get beat fronting, you're screwed. This will let him deter that, but then get behind if needed. His technique on drop coverage, and a couple of the clips I sent over to you show him just kind of not being in the position you want him to be in when drop coverage is happening. That can improve, and I think that's very coachable. And then also recognition on some of the more aggressive coverages. I think there are just some times where it doesn't seem like he's trying to get into position for a catch hedge or a hard hedge or anything like that. So there's a lot that can be cleaned up. A lot of what made him look poor to a lot of fans in the past playoffs had to do with the Clippers just not running the right screen coverages based on who they were playing. Like you can't repeatedly run drop coverage against Luka Doncic and expect it to have a ton of success. You're going to give up pull-up threes and those longer pull-up shots over and over again, and that has nothing to do with which big man is in that drop coverage. It could have been AD, it could have been Harrell. You're still going to give up those same shots. So that is, shouldn't be counted against him, but we should take a close look at what he can do and then what we might ask him to do. And other than switching, which I'm still iffy about, I think the rest of the screen coverages I'd feel okay with, and you would just want to clean up some of the technique on some of those.
Yeah, now I'm seeing a lot of the same stuff you're seeing. Really quick before we move on, I wanted to point out something about this play. So he gets switched on Jamal Murray here, and just watch a couple things, right? A, he doesn't have to chase Murray that far back. He almost chases him all the way back to half court. And B, watch Harrell's feet on this play. He is very active, and it looks like he's doing stuff, but every motion he makes, he doesn't have a base. He doesn't have a squared foot foundation. And every time he takes a step, his step isn't like under his shoulders, right? He's taking long strides. And I don't know, if just watch this play, and he's so easily beat with that crossover. Jamal Murray at no point is stressed out about having Montrezl Harrell switched onto him in this play, and he's under control the entire time. And it might look like Harrell harasses him, but he doesn't. Yeah,
he's going out further than he needs to. He's not on balance. He has that happy feet, but not in a purposeful way. And he happy feet. I would say is a negative term. He doesn't use his feet in a purposeful way, and he's reaching and overextending himself while simultaneously giving Murray a high foot to attack. And I think I sent over a couple of plays where he does this. He is not a great switch defender from a technique standpoint. Physically, he should be able to be better. So as is, I don't have the utmost confidence in him in that position, but more can be made of the physical tools you have with him. Some of the other clips I sent along have to do with either him rotating over to take a charge, or he's rotating over to block a shot, or even in situations where he's a ball screen big man and he might be out of position, he's still able to use that quickness to recover to where he should go. Or like he's hard hedging and then he has the quickness to recover to the big man and defend that roll to the rim in the short roll. So there's a lot there physically that you can make more out of. It's just a matter of cleaning up the technique and using him smarter based on who you're playing against.
Yeah, and I'm pulling that clip up now if you want to check it out. There's one against Dallas where he recovers with his speed and quickness, and that's something you like to see. He doesn't use that as much on defense as he does on offense to his advantage. And he can just be smarter, I think. And he'll, I think, grow a lot as a player this year. I'm really confident of that he'll just improve being around really, really good experienced guys. But this is an athletic play, Tim, to be able to hedge and recover like this and still contest and make a great block at the rim.
Yep. And he's not starting off in the position you want him to be. You want him to be more level with the ball. He's kind of in between. He's almost in a like no hedge territory where he's not deterring a drive at all. But he's also not like sticking close on his guy
a lot. He sits back and waits for the coverage to come to him. And you don't always want to like blitz a guy, but you need to engage a little bit. Sorry to interrupt. That was just, he sits back in his drop too much for my liking.
And it's not that he's even deep. He's just kind of planted at the elbow in a way that isn't really helping anything that the defense is doing. It's putting him out of position to recover to defend a shot at the rim. And by doing that, you're more susceptible to committing a foul or getting beat. Thankfully on this play, he has the quickness to recover, but that is something that needs to be cleaned up. That drive shouldn't even be happening, because he should be able to just be in front for that second to let his guard defender get back into place, and then he recovers to his big man. That's what you want that defense to look like. He's just in no man's land.
Definitely. And we got a lot more to talk about this week. We'll be digging probably into these 4 players for the considerable future, I would guess. But my man Tim's got a hard out soon. Do you want to do a little bit on Gasol, or do you want to save him for next time?
Yeah. No, we're good.
Right, cool.
I have about another 15 minutes. So Harrell, I think you want him as a perimeter big. Markieff, you want him as that mobile big where he's more in the ball screen actions, but able to do whatever different coverage you want him to do. I'm also fine with him being a perimeter big, but he's less of a rotating kind of guy. I think Trez is stronger as a rotator than Markieff is. And the quickness, the physicality, the force, the shot blocking, the charge taking, all of that has to do with that. Gasol is going to be an anchor big, and he's going to play drop coverage, and that's about it. Don't feel great about him in ISO. He, again, like I mentioned before, he's kind of like Dwight, where in the playoffs, there will be series where we may just bench him, or his minutes may be limited to just one stint, because he will be susceptible to certain things defensively if the other team has dynamic guards that put your defense in a position where they're going to have to be overcoming some of those physical limitations. And then AD, I didn't even know what defensive role I wanted to put him as. He can pretty much do everything. I just want him all over the place. I guess he would be, let me see what he was last year. My guess is perimeter big, and LA really tapped into that. Yeah. Okay. Perimeter big. AD was a perimeter big last year, meaning he was more the power forward, off ball, off action sort of big man that was able to just recover and rotate and cause a lot of trouble by defending the rim. So I'm good with that. In the playoffs, he was obviously much more versatile than the C+. In the regular, this right here is regular season stuff. He is incredibly versatile, can take on any of these jobs, but that's really what he looks like. So Marc Gasol, really the hole you have with these players is you need another anchor big, and that's where he shows up. And let's take a look at some of his data. He's a pretty good interior defender. Yeah. An A in terms of limiting shots at the rim. He contests a lot of shots at the rim, which we see with these 2 rows. He gets a good number of blocks. His block rate on contests is average. The shooting at the rim against him is worse than against the average player. I think this B doesn't look all that hot if we filter him against anchor bigs. Let's see. Let's take a look at that rim defense against other anchor bigs. Yeah, so compared to other anchor bigs, he's about average as a rim protector, which is fine. But we'll see in these clips, he's a bit more limited just in terms of his mobility, and that will hurt him at different points in time.
Yeah, I think I got a couple of.
Clippers are trailed by as many as 23.
See Jokic's numbers are already a double.
Yeah, sorry. Oh my God, they're all playing at once. Oh God. Okay. Yeah, I got some clips here. Here we go. With Mark.
Okay, so we're looking at Trez, right? Or are we looking at Mark?
Oh, we had Mark. You know, that's who I had set up. But sorry, you're still going Trez?
Okay, now I'm seeing Mark. Okay, we're good.
Yeah. That was my bad on the film. Sorry for all you in the stream. You're seeing behind the scenes. I cut all this stuff out of the pod, but you get all the juicy flubs. Yeah, Mark's very slow with the feats, and his drops are very deep. And if you set a ball high, like that mid-range shot's gonna be there all the time. Deep drops, and he can get beat behind by a guy like Tice, who's got a lot more foot speed. That's why that high ball screen, they just kept running it over and over with Gasol, pulling him out of the paint, letting Kemba just go to work on him, you know, in and out dribble here. And Kemba's nasty, you know, Kemba can score. He's a great player, but this shouldn't be this easy to get a layup at the rim in the playoffs. You know, this is Marc Gasol clips from the playoffs. So, you know, he's going to give up against those small pull-up shooters a lot of opportunities. So we'll get into much more Gasol soon. I don't want to take too much of Tim's time, but thank you guys for joining us in the chat. We'll try and come back on Wednesday with a little bit more footage and just try and dig deeper into these guys. And Tim, anything before you go you want to say with in terms of the defense? God, I'm
sure. Yeah,
I'm gonna cut all this out.
So I think overall the Lakers have the right pieces to be able to play the right types of defense, like they did last season in the playoffs. They added a wing stopper. They, I think, can make much more out of Matthews and Harrell than their previous teams did by putting them into better roles. I think overall this team can still be a really, really good defensive unit. Gasol is the one more limited guy who it's just, you know, he can do what he does and you're not going to be able to make a whole lot more out of him than what we've seen already. But with the rest of them, I think there's clear room for improvement. Harrell can be an average defender instead of a really poor defender like he has been the past couple seasons. Schroeder, I think, is a good point of attack on ball guy, fits in well, and offensively he brings plenty of value. I still think this is going to be a really good defensive team. In the regular season, not super concerned about it, and we may see, if the team doesn't sign another center, we might see Harrell playing 5, which will make him look worse than he otherwise could. And we may see the team just running standard coverages where 80 is all not that versatile, and we're running a lot of drop coverage, and Wesley Matthews might be more a chaser than a wing stopper. But then once we get to the playoffs and AD is playing the 5, that'll free Montrezl Harrell up to play more his natural position as the power forward. We might see the rotation shortening up a bit. We might see more Wes Matthews wing stopper. I just see all of the right stuff is there. The hand that Frank Vogel has been dealt is everything he needs. And we might not see everything come out to play in the regular season, but for the playoffs, I feel really good about this team. You just want to make sure that everybody's healthy getting to that point, because if any one of these different pieces falls out of this rotation, you start to have a lot of problems because you're just more vulnerable in ways because you don't have second or third options in specific areas.
Well, that makes me confident that you are feeling good about it. I guess I think the drop off on defense will be more significant. But yeah, Tim, finishing up with this this poll you had out there, what does it look like?
I think only one person has responded, but on that same Menti link, using that same code, you can go in and rank from 1 to 30 what you think the Lakers' regular season defense will look like. I will say somewhere in the 5 to 10 range. Okay. Maybe that looks even better in the playoffs.
I personally feel like it's going to be like 11 to 15 now, because I'm just not sure if the just dedication to it in the regular season will be there. They could end up being not the 15th worst defense in the league, but in the regular season, maybe they just aren't full strength all the time, and that slips a couple spots. But I think they're good. I don't think that it's their like clearing away strength anymore, but we'll have plenty more time to go over that this season. Tim threw up the Menti link and code once more in the chat. And for all you listeners out there, please feel free to follow us on twitch.tv/Lakers Exceptionalism Pod. We're trying to stream at 10 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. And if the time changes, we'll let you all know on Twitter and Twitch. But until then, we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks so much.